I will call the Wednesday, August 10th meeting of the Trees and Greenery Committee to order, and I would like to welcome our new member, Sister Mayor, and on this
Yes,
well,
thank you.
you'll find this committee is everyone like dedicated to the city, like everyone on city council and every council, but more tree hibernation. So we have the minutes. Well, we sort of don't have the minutes for the July meeting. And it says attached. And when I was doing the agenda, a hot day, my grandchildren were waiting for me. I couldn't get them attached. And then I couldn't even get the attached word unattached. So we didn't get the minutes. Although Stephanie Seifert may have sent them out in the last couple of days.
I didn't. I just opened up the web link and I did not see the minutes attached to that.
Oh, okay. Well, they didn't, it's not attached to the agenda, so we can, Dick has reviewed them. I found them to be okay, so I'm sure they are okay. So we can officially vote on them. So we have tree removal requests, 88 Lincoln, Silver Maple, Jeff.
Yeah. So there's two large silver maples. This is the smaller of the two. If you recall, I think Dick, you recall maybe 2 years ago or last spring, there was extensive root damage due to building a new home there that we were notified really when it was too late. So there was damage from building the home, and then there was damage after fact from Unitil. So there's been really heavy root damage on both trees. We did proactive soil injections of mycorrhizae, which is a fungus that has a symbiotic relationship with the roots to take in water. We did compost tea, and we've done retrenchment pruning, reducing the canopy of a larger tree, focused on fine root production. Primarily hoping that the larger tree would at least hold out. The smaller tree, to be honest, even though it's really big when you look at the trunk, there's never been much of a canopy there. But anyways, I was alerted this spring because there was a lot of fruiting bodies and fungus around the tree. I actually removed that just to see if something would come back, what's going to happen, and there's more fruiting bodies, and there's now a bunch of tip decline. I think the tree is a complete liability. The damage has been done. It's a shame, but I do think the tree is a liability. On top of that, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that right now.
So Chuck, maybe you can, for the general public, maybe you can explain fruiting bodies.
Oh yeah, fruiting bodies are fungus like mushrooms, and yeah, the compost tea is what we brew in-house that has compost that's made into liquid, so all those organisms go into the soil via liquid, and then they do work in the soil, such as just from them being active, they increase the pore space in the soil, which is makes it more like a sponge instead of compacted, which then allows the tree to hold more water. So just one of the things that compost tea does. But anyways, unfortunately, this tree makes me nervous, especially after that microburst we had 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and the tree next to it actually has some issues that we need to address at the same time. But this does, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you can estimate how old the larger tree is. Really large.
I would say that tree was planted when the elms were dying, which would be in the 50s, right?
Anywhere from the 20s to the 50s. Silver maple became a very popular street tree. After we lost the elms because they grew really fast. We knew that at that time, we knew that they were better than sugar maples as far as salt damage and problems. Cities loaded.
Yeah.
They do grow very, very fast.
Yeah.
Grow twice as fast as sugar maple. So the tree is not hundreds of years old.
Okay.
Yes.
But they also have a tendency to fail.
Yeah, they're brittle, aren't they?
Yeah, that's why we do pretty, not with other species, but with the silver maple, we do really aggressive retrenchment pruning, which is like reducing the canopy to get rid of that sail.
Yeah,
And they're one of the few species, such as like a willow, that you can do that to and they're fine. Whereas if we did that sort of pruning to an oak, it would just kill the tree. So sometimes if you see that pruning and it looks really shocking, it's not, it's planned.
preventative.
That tree is the home to many different critters. They could all be squirrels, it could be owls. So if you're gonna take it down, do so before spring.
Yeah, we noticed that this morning. There's a surprise in there for tree crew.
If it's anything occupied in those cavities, that's home.
Yeah,
I was looking at it the other day, the homeowner was interested in having trees replanted. So just keep that in mind.
yes,
And the retrenchment that Chuck talked about that they've been doing, has been doing for several years, like Aldrich, Baxter areas. I think it saved a lot of trees. We were getting more and more requests to remove them. Yeah, and I think it saved.
yeah, there's respond well. Yeah, not to open up another can of worms, but I think moving forward, there's some gray areas around this damage and regarding our tree ordinances. You know, at the time, it didn't seem right that just rip out a root system of a tree and walk away. It's not the homeowner's fault, and it's somewhat the contractor's fault, but the contractor's not a tree expert. I mean, there's a gray area there. So I think we have the ordinances ready to be kind of revised. It's just a matter of getting it out on the front end, in maybe the building permit or the planning process, so that people that don't know about trees that are building a new home and a contractor can say, hey, there's this tree we need to watch out for, as opposed to ripping out a whole root system and then we're kind of on the hook to remove the tree.
How do we do that? How do we activate something? I mean, you're saying the ordinances are already in place.
We have ordinances, but they're not, we revised them, and that process needs to be followed through, so I think that's,
Yeah, the challenge is there's overlapping ordinances too. Because an excavation permit for a water service or a gas line doesn't always highlight, did you do a check for all trees? Where's the location? Are you gonna potentially damage trees? Are you within the drip line of the tree? So those, I think the overlapping areas of involvement need to be reviewed to make sure we capture all the different areas, because a contractor rightfully will go through his permit and say, yeah, there's nothing in his permit that says I have to make it on this. Just do what he thinks is appropriate. And not for any ill will or anything like that, but their job is to put pipe in the ground.
Right.
And they're not always thinking, they just think of roots of something they have to get through. So I think it's, we've worked hard with a lot of the local contractors to, heighten their awareness. We talked to our crews about it. And I think it's just a matter of adding additional language in some of the excavation permits
Yeah.
especially. That make it clear that, when you're in contact with any trees, you have to contact Chuck or his crew to work with them.
and it's a small city, and for the most part, that does happen. I mean, there's contractors that they just do a ton of work here and then they call me directly. That's awesome, but occasionally there's one that slips through the cracks. So I wouldn't say it's a huge issue, but it happens, once a year type of thing. There's one situation or so anyways.
Could you head it off at all at some point? Basically, I know that the contractor probably bids a price, but those air spades
Yeah,
would be ideal to avoid.
yeah, I mean, that could be a possibility for putting that in language of if you're this close, you have to airspace. It would be. Yeah, we don't have that language yet, and I don't know, I'm not an earthwork guy, so I don't know if that's, I think it is possible, but there's certain jobs that
There's
are,
certain things that, you're gonna damage trees and that's just all. There's times when you're not gonna avoid it. But it's going into with your eyes open and being aware that that's the condition, that's the situation. The other challenge is that oftentimes a general contractor will get that permit and then have a subcontractor come in, which is the case in this instance, where there was no, no knowledge, no coordination, it's just he was told to go dig a hole. So But I think it's something that, we as a committee probably could spend some time, pulling out the various ordinances that impact trees. Kind of provide a review that, see where the trend picks up.
You wanna watch a classic death of a tree, the sugar maple at the Catholic cemetery. Going up over the old railroad overpass, it's on the left. When RSRB put in that road improvement. Over the retaining wall along the edge of the cemetery. The tree won't make it another year. It's just, I've been watching it for 3 or 4 years, just dying off.
Yeah, these extreme droughts aren't helping either.
I happened to watch them in the process of installing gas supply lines near the library that Silver Lake was talking about. And they used a chainsaw to cut a root close to the main stem. The root was bigger than a man's leg. Well, that tree is certainly doomed.
That sidewalk project, which was 17 years ago, was a great learning experience for all. And I think that was probably the turning point of being aware of the damage some of these projects were, especially the gas company. That was a learning opportunity, unfortunately.
Yeah,
It killed a number of trees.
4 years before it happens, but it will happen.
Yeah.
I move removal of the smaller of the two. Second, based on what you said, and also the form of it is not much to speak of.
No,
A second. Hold on, one point of discussion, sorry. The residents contacted us, they thought they were going to join online. Is there anybody out there?
There is, attendees. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this?
Robin or Katie?
Well, Robin's interested in the graveyard.
Oh, Lord.
I'll allow to talk. Katie, would you like to speak to this?
No, I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate all these comments.
Okay,
Anybody in our massive audience?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. Do I need to come up to?
yeah, and state your, well,
Okay, well,
yeah, that's just for recording.
I live across the street at 81 Lincoln Avenue. I'm one of Dick's neighbors. I'm also a general contractor in town. So I watch the process here with interest. And so, and I've spoken to Dick. Peter, I might have talked to you about it. I know I've talked to you, Chuck, about this and what we observed, what we saw. I think the point of the contract, general contractor and sub sometimes not being coordinated is a good one. I think that was the largest issue here, is that the excavator, and to my knowledge, dug beyond the permissions they had from DigSafe, which is how they got into those routes, because they went all the way to the water line, which in my recollection was not part of the permissions. They were doing the gas line at first. I don't think they would have gotten into the roots the way they did. They cut out the piece that Dick described, and then Unitil had to come in and do the repair that made an even more extensive cut. And it was largely to the larger of the two silver maples, which was my concern. The smaller one, I would, all day long, I would say, take that one out. If you can replace it, great, but there's an awful lot of wires there. All of the power's on that side of the street. So the reason that other one looks like something out of a Dr. Seuss book is because it's been chopped up over the years to let the wires go through. So some sort of replacement of those, I would advocate. I think the larger silver maple is gonna head downhill. I don't know how long it's gonna take, but that is an enormous tree. And the grinders who live right beneath it, the Lacabas who live next door, that thing could land on your yard. I don't know if it's long enough to hit your house, but it sure would do a lot of damage to my house if it fell across the street. So I'm gonna keep an eye on that. And then commentary in terms of maybe coordination with the inspection department. I've learned a lot more about trying to help and save trees over the last 10 years than probably the rest of my career combined. The more work I do in Portsmouth, the lots, it's getting harder and harder to do anything. Many times we don't even have room to put dumpsters on the properties we're working on now because the lots are so small. So we're finding, we're working around all sorts of obstructions, not just trees, houses next door, all those things. So maybe there's some language that the inspection department can put in the general permitting about how if you have to do any excavation that's within the canopy of the tree. That's my very basic understanding. If you're digging underneath any portion of that canopy, you may be putting that tree's life in danger. So that would be step one. The second would be as part of the, you don't typically have to get an excavation permit if I'm pulling a general building permit, so that it's my responsibility as the general contractor to coordinate with all the individual subs. So it's my responsibility to make sure that the excavator doesn't either go beyond his scope or get into the tree roots of the tree that you're trying to save. We consult typically with Cornerstone or one of the local companies to come in. If we see that there's a possibility, probably should be calling you directly, Chuck, because I'm going right to the source. But in any case, we're taking these steps. We've done air spading on a number of properties. It's dirty, it's expensive. You have to warn all the neighbors because it makes a lot of dust. But if you can explain that that's the way to handle the project and to try to save all the trees, people are understanding of that. Most of us want as many of these beautiful trees to last as possible. So I think that, and also within the ordinance, if there was some way to give it some teeth. I know when we talked about this, it was like, okay, so, and I spoke directly, I called the contractor directly and talked to him, and I basically got the brush off, like, this is none of your business. Well, I'm in a butter, so yes, it is my business. There should be some sort of penalty if a contractor doesn't really follow through and coordinate, either a fine or a portion of repaying or participating in the process of replanting, because this is costing the citizens of Portsmouth, not just the people who, you know, live beneath the tree, but everybody around it. People, you know, across town will be paying and participating in the process of replacing these. And certainly in the case of the smaller tree, maybe there wasn't a lot we could have done to make that look better, but it's be a shame that that large sulfur maple has to come down because of this one incident, in which there's no accountability for either the excavator or the general contractor. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Yes, so just to be clear about the large silver maple, there was extensive root damage there. We've already done a lot of pruning to mitigate hazard that would go alongside with that, but we're also going to go back and there's a large leader with like a burl with fungus on it, and we are actually going to reduce that limb by about 20 feet or so, just because it's not the most ideal leader. And then on top of this, I will send the committee a copy of our potential new tree protection ordinances, which do have all sorts of teeth in terms of fines and all that, but we can look at it and see what works and what doesn't work. Just have it maybe the next meeting and discuss that further. But there's also, it's basically taking a cross-sectional area of a tree and calculating the value associated with that. So
So two things. One, you know, you'll receive it, it'll be a draft. What we're willing to do an internal review, legal, to make sure there's not any overlapping things that are either conflicting or included, so that we can have a comprehensive ordinance change with the council. So it's just a start, you know, it's, as you probably all observed, ordinance changes can oftentimes take a long time. But so I just want to, you know, set expectations so that we're not assuming it's going to get done very quickly.
And thank you, sir, for your comments. And can you give us your name for the benefit of our audience and our minute taker?
It's Matthew Beebe. I live at 81 Lincoln Avenue. So I'm a concerned citizen and a local contractor.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
So we have a motion to try to relieve Chuck's nervousness about this tree. All in favor?
Aye.
Remove.
Aye.
Oh, yeah. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Great conversation. I learned a lot.
Pleasant Street Burial Ground.
Mr. Chair, we have somebody from the cemetery committee who's Susan, who's here. She has some images that she would like to share.
Sue Sterry. I live at Broad Street in Portsmouth and I'm co-chair of Cemetery Committee. Our committee started briefly back in September. We came up with a mission statement, which I'll read. I don't have to use that often. To restore, preserve, and safeguard Portsmouth's historic cemeteries and their history for future generations. So in this vein, at Pleasant Street, there are, as you can see, cedars that have overgrown way out of proportion. So we're requesting that those would be taken down. If they were taken down, the pictures that follow will show you what the view from the street would be. Currently, no one knows there's a cemetery there.
Is that-
So this,
Sorry, that current photo?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the current. This is what it looked like probably at the turn of the century. If that was in a book, that was 1903. Yeah, that's the current look of the cemetery right now. There's no indication of there's a cemetery being there. And the oldest gravestone in there is 1751. It was, that plot of land was given to the city by Captain John Pickering back in 1754. There are people buried there, the Havens, the Wendells, a lot of people who were all very influential in the history of our town and during the Revolutionary War and thereafter setting up the current government being one of the 13 colonies. So this is a side view. It's a pretty little cemetery. Yeah, if you could just go through it, just so you know what we're looking at behind those. These are all current pictures that I took this spring when we were looking at other projects also. There are only 72 headstones in there, but regardless, they're important to the history of this area. That's the Wendell tomb. I know Michael Griffin's been inside and there are still remains in there. This was also, there are remains inside of that. But over the years, no one has taken care of, a lot of the cemeteries on a regular basis. So unfortunately, these trees overgrew that and there's nothing to save other than let it be as it is. So and that's the backside. That's how long.
Who's that belong to?
I think it's Coos. I have it up here. I think it's the Coos family. But it is, or Barrel, there's barrels buried in there and it may be part of the Barrel family. Yeah, so these are just what the cemetery looks now. And in this time of year, it's a pretty low cemetery. We plan on going in and cleaning up all the headstones. We just finished Point of Graves 2 weekends ago. We got all 112 headstones cleaned. We're working on the walls to repair them there. And we'll also start repairing some of the headstones over there next year. So this wall that we're looking at right now is over 270 years old. It is the original wall. It was built at the same time that North Cemetery and Point of Grave walls were built. They were tested back in, well, earlier, but 2013, there was a Blue Ribbon Committee and they authorized an existing condition assessment report, which I have. It's online, it's under Parks and Greenery. It's a 132-page document that tells you what needs to be done in the city of Portsmouth back in 2013. A few of those things have been done and it's great, and even the Wendell tomb has been worked on. But in this report, it was, they tested all the walls and all 3 walls are all made of the same materials. So they know that they were all built roughly at the same time. With these cedars being as close as they are, that wall never dries out on the backside, which is not great for the wall. So, and the other thing is, I've spoken to a lot of, I guess for lack of a better word, cemetery restoration specialists across the country, not just in New England. And the typical, and they work on much larger cemeteries, but it goes for small cemeteries too, is that they try to go back to whatever the oldest documentation they can find of a cemetery, whether it's written or whether there's actual pictures. So they would go back to, and I couldn't find pictures that didn't show these trees in it. Every shot's from this angle, but right at that center area where the little entranceway is, all the old pictures are taken from there. So there's no way to prove that the cedars weren't already there, other than I don't believe these cedars are 250 years old. I have no idea how you would estimate how old a cedar tree is. I know they can get old, but so our premise is that, you know, these are not appropriate to this cemetery. And perhaps, you know, during whatever the fad was, people didn't want to look at the cemetery because cemeteries weren't important to people over the years, over hundreds of years. So people may have planted those just for this reason, to obscure the headstones in the cemetery being located. So for the A, to preserve that stone wall, and B, so that people from all over the country and the world do come to Portsmouth and do visit our graveyards. Both the city and the librarians have told me they field phone calls all the time, and some of them didn't even know Pleasant Street Cemetery existed. So I guess that's our justification of why we'd like to cut them down, let people going by be able to view its pretty little cemetery and know that it's here and it's part of our history. So I guess, you know, if anybody has any questions, that's our motivation behind it.
Thank you. Any questions?
Think you know how long was it in there?
No. I will say in support of what Sue said. A number of years ago, we did extensive thinning removal of some point graves.
Mhm.
And at that time, there was a fair amount of resistance, as always the case, to anything. But I think anyone would agree now, it's a very beneficial move. It's enhanced the beauty of that cemetery.
The other point I didn't make is the rest of our cemeteries are right out there in view, and just people walking by, even driving by, oftentimes stop and go through Point of Graves or up in the South Street cemeteries or North and Newman cemeteries. This poor little graveyard doesn't have that, doesn't have a chance because nobody knows it's there. There's no sign up front saying, you know, this is a cemetery behind all these trees. So that's also another point.
Mr. Chair, we have a hand raised in the virtual
Robin?
world.
Robin?
Hold on. Okay, I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm Robin Laurie Meyerkoff. I live at 53 Whidden Street, and I walk by the cemetery a few times a day. So a couple of my concerns are those trees create a shade on the sidewalk, and on hot summer days, there's no shade on the other side, and it can be very hot. It's also home to lots of birds. I actually went there last night, and the amount of birds in those arborvitae are amazing. There's just lots. So I was wondering if there could be some sort of compromise where we trim the trees instead of just getting rid of them completely. I always hate to see trees disappear. And I know that there's a historical significance to the cemetery, but maybe there's a compromise that can be worked out.
Thank you, Robin. Pat?
Yeah, I was there yesterday and I was trying to figure out how to improve the area without actually removing the greenery. And I definitely think the entrance could benefit from taking out a couple of limbs. I could actually see which ones you could remove easily so that you actually can see the sign there And it feels more welcoming to actually that you can go in. Right now you have to, even me, I had to duck to get underneath the leaves that are right there, the branches, so I know that's not the same thing as taking them all down and preserving the wall, but it's a compromise to open up the space so that you can appreciate that there is a cemetery there. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Chuck, did you ever get a chance to think about alternatives or have, part of it or?
We can really do anything. We can prune these. You could in theory prune them so that the canopy didn't start until above eye level. It would look a little weird at first, but you picture, basically you'd be seeing the trunk of those trees and the canopy would start like where that mouse is. That's an option. But it's also an option to remove them. I mean, it can all be done. I guess is what I'm getting at. It's definitely an aesthetic thing. So.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that was it.
Yes, it is aesthetic, but it's also, a barrier or destructive towards that stone wall. So I know that's a choice between the two.
That's true.
Yeah, the other thing would be, there are lots of trees in that neighborhood, so I understand birds being displaced and other things like that, but they're not gonna not be able to find another home. Something else could be planted there properly. I don't know what the dimensions are. From the nearest headstone back towards the stone wall, it doesn't mean, we could put something down there, but it would have to be manicured all the time. Or the edge, which is the parking lot from the nursing home, might be a great place to plant some arborvitaes that are gonna grow, or something that will grow high enough for those trees that it's not such a nasty looking edge as it exists right now. And again, it would attract the birds and animals and would also be part of an erosion barrier from the runoff from the parking lot into the cemetery. Those are suggestions.
Point of clarification, if we did remove the trees, Chuck, would that include the stumps as well? We leave the stumps in place.
I would imagine we would remove the stumps just because it would be very unsightly, I think, to have the stumps there.
So
And just to speak to the replanting, we definitely would not, if we're removing this for the benefit of the wall, we're not replanting something that we're gonna then have grown on the wall. And the edge there, I do understand what you're saying, but there's really dense canopy with Norway maples that it's really not an appropriate. The edge is not really cut and dry. It's a weird, soft edge, and maybe down the road, if some work gets done and that looks way different from a parking lot standpoint, but right now the Norway maples really dominate that zone. So it would be, we need to access that for mowing and all other things. It wouldn't be appropriate to plant something along the parking lot side. So anyways, I just want to clarify that if these get removed,
So
the replanting is not a good option.
So just to further clarify, removal of stumps would be grinding.
Grinding, which, so that's another thing, we really haven't ground stumps in 1700s cemeteries.
So that's my concern.
So
Because anything we do in a cemetery,
I mean,
it's highly regulated.
We can go very, very,
Right.
very carefully, but that would be a new subject for us.
Well, that would also, I've already looked into that and according to the state, first of all, I went down there yesterday too, and my impression is the stumps aren't like huge stumps like the silver maple.
Yeah.
When I saw them most of the time, they were going up like this and then they branch out 5 or 6 of them. So it's not that it's not a job, but it's not like doing,
Yeah.
a big tree. all we would have to have, and this would be the cost of the cemetery committee, and we would, fundraise for it, would be to have an archaeologist there. So in case we ran into any remains, then we would stop and the archaeologist would be there. So, and I've already spoken to her because we've got 2 or 3 other projects going around that need archaeologists too. So, yes, it's regulated and it's costly, but it's not out of question that it can be done efficiently.
Depending what's done with this, when we did some work over in Kittery at one of the cemeteries, we just ground, an inch or so down the ground.
Yeah.
Because we had no intention of replanting in that same spot.
Right.
So we just left the stump to rot, and it was just a way to, those stumps are gonna be at eye level. If you cut all these down.
Oh, no, I
you know,
assumed it
people-
was gonna be,
People are gonna see them, so you gotta get it down to at least enough to cover it with grass or mulch or whatever you're gonna put.
oh,
down.
I
Yeah.
assumed that's what we were
Yeah,
doing.
we-
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Typically, when we grind a stump, we're going down below grade,
Right.
6 or 8 inches.
A
And that's
lot.
when you're gonna get into who knows what kind of issues. So if these were just ground, just below the duff layer, it would serve the purpose.
Right.
It would keep the machinery off that wall as much as, as possible. You'd probably rent a small grinder.
I was gonna say, we may not be just,
Oh, no, we,
we may just have to cut it as flush as possible.
And then-
Not
We've done
not
this,
get grinder in there, 'cause I would be worried about headstones and
we've seen it all in terms of weird places to grind, like gas lines that are connected to the stuff. We,
No.
And what about-
this is not a big deal in terms of grinding.
What about taking out 1 or 2 on either side of the entrance?
Yes.
Just so everybody else knows, it's gonna leave a big ugly spot on whatever tree you leave, because. That the trees have all been relying on each other to make that, sort of hedgerow. So taking out 1 or 2 of them to open up that and see what it's gonna look like. It's gonna leave a big dark spot on either side of those columns.
I would make a motion to remove them all. You're in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a penny, in for a pound, it's just that. And the goal is to reclaim the cemetery and to expose the wall. It's really, I think it's a shame, and I understand the loss. I have a couple of these cedars in my yard, which are incredible in terms of the amount of birds and other types of squirrels and other things that live in there. But, Sue is correct in that the cemeteries were not a focus in the past, and thereby were neglected. And it is a city charge to maintain cemeteries, and it's unfortunate, but the trees probably should never be planted there. And I just make a motion to go ahead and take it down reluctantly.
Vandalism that occurred in that cemetery could have been less of a factor. It's almost like it's its own hidden covered domain.
Yep.
When they broke into that too. Like, we go to anyone ever see what they were doing in there. Unless they heard something.
I'll assume that second is we have discussion on it. I second, I guess, Peter's motion. Would there be a possibility of, say, removing every other tree? And see how it looks. And then revisiting it at a later time.
That way you.
I like that idea a lot. As a person who lives in the neighborhood, I think maybe some sort of compromise where we do it in phases and see how it looks.
That way you'd be able to see in there more. You would be able to get more drying on the inside wall probably. And you can still have birds being able to use the residual trees that are there. Just thinning, like taking them.
So we're actually in
Oh, sorry.
deliberations.
Sorry.
Yeah, and to be clear, the city staff, we will implement whatever is decided. I mean, we can, with this situation, there's not a lot we can't do, so. Whatever's decided, we can accommodate, whether that's removal or whether that's every other tree or pruning or raising the line of sight or both, we can get creative. But if the decision is to remove them, we'll do that as well.
My guess is that.
So my motion was to remove them all.
Right.
I'm not, I don't take it as a friendly amendment, to do every other I just think it's a halfway step and I think we have to, I hate taking the trees out, but I'm very conflicted in that, you know, my charge is to take care of cemeteries. And it conflicts with my charge also to take care of trees. But in this case, you know, cemeteries have been neglected for a long time. And I think that outweighs, in this case, the trees.
The tree may have been planted to make that more private, and Dick will remember there was a Willie's Jeep dealership where the Wentworth Home parking lot is, and that was in existence till the early 70s. And that area was not the showplace of Portsmouth 75 years ago. And they may have been planted to kind of hide it, give it a little more privacy. And I will vote against the motion. I'd like to explore what it would look like if we took every one of the other one. So, I need other discussion. We usually don't have a lot of. Motions, Joanne.
Peter, just to
Could
clarify.
I just say something, Peter?
No,
Yes,
we're,
yes.
well, it's, we're,
Yeah.
Oh, is this Jeff?
It's that.
Yes, hi.
okay, yes, sorry.
Well, along the lines of trying to compromise, you know, would it be possible to take the ones that are nearest to the entrance, take those down, kind of open it up to make it more inviting, and then make the other ones sort of more of a hedge? Just a thought.
I tend to lean more towards the compromise also, just and do that, play it out. And then if it doesn't work, we now understand we have to do full removal.
Yes, so I believe there were 3 on one side of the entrance and 5 on the other. And easily, if you took out the 2 on either side of the entrance, it's going to open up so you could actually see that there's a cemetery there. And we took out a couple of others on the one side where there are 5.
Yeah, and if we
would
go
open
that,
it up some more.
yeah, and if we go that route as well, we would take the lower canopy off the remaining trees so that it's not touching the wall, just in terms of preserving the wall. Obviously, it would still be shaded, but there'd be some airflow as opposed to direct contact. I can't recall if there's direct contact right now with foliage against the wall. There's not.
No, it's closed.
Okay.
Peter, could you put that picture back up of the one from across the street? Just so that we can see that while we're talking.
So you take that out, and then every other through here.
But we still have to, we have to vote on.
Now,
Right,
can we clear, if that does get decided, can we also just have it that it can somewhat be at the discretion of the arborist doing the work, because we might, sometimes the other one, say we go every other one, and one of those every other ones has an issue or something, it might vary a little, but
But
do you know what I
thin it out a
mean?
little bit.
Yeah, thin it out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I think we're at the point where we have total discretion, so total confidence in the technically how we're going to say.
Absolutely.
Peter's motion to
Denude and clear cut.
I'm trying to do a nice way to say it.
Really true.
To totally remove the cedar trees in this Pleasant Street Cemetery. All in favor of that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed to that motion? 1, 2, 3.
I'm opposed.
4. Okay,
Didn't think about this when you added that extra body.
Okay, so the motion fails. Do we have another motion?
I have a question. At our meetings, we can't use anybody from our committee online to vote, so I'm wondering why it's different here.
Well, because I'm saying it's different. I don't know what the rules are, frankly, but we've always, that's the way we've always done it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So do we have a motion to remove every other tree at the discretion of the arborist.
I'll make that motion.
I'd second that with the clarification of opening the main focal point of the entryway.
Yes, yes.
I support that.
Okay, so we have a motion to remove every other tree with the clarification that we open up more at the entrance and that we do this with the, we provide authority for actions at the discretion of the arborist.
If we discover that it's an unsightly mess, and it doesn't look right, because they'll be there on either side. If you can just take them down.
Or you come in the next meeting and say, let's,
I would suggest we come in the next meeting.
the next meeting after the work is done. All right, okay, all in favor of that motion? Say aye, or raise.
I,
So all opposed to that motion.
Opposed?
So I think that's 6-3 in favor. So it's a vote.
Most controversy we've seen in
Thank you all very much. I appreciate you listening to a concerned citizen. Have a good day.
Robin, take care.
thank you, Robin.
I'll make sure that we have communication with the cemetery committee, if it comes back in, or if you continue to have problems with that.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
there's no,
So
It's
thank
fine.
you for coming.
oh, thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope Robin's presence, Joanna's presence doesn't portend a major debates on every. Okay, we have an update from City Arborist Giles back.
All right, well, since our last meeting, I was away for a little bit, but we had some, this microburst, that's the gift that keeps on giving. So the way that works is there's a bunch of calls, during the storm and immediately after, and then there's a bunch of calls like this week. Folks have been on vacation, they get home, there's really large trees down in backyards, that have abut city wooded areas. So we have some of that subcontracted work with cranes, that's gonna be happening this week. But we've really been on a storm damage thing for the past couple weeks. The crew did complete Porter Street, the tree surrounds on the one-way section, well, that one section of Porter where all the condos are. All the old porous pave, that was kind of an inferior product. We were experimenting with this, was all removed, and in-house we put everything newly in. So it looks really nice. And now that the heat has kind of died down and the temperatures are suitable to do more of that, we'll finish off doing any downtown areas that don't have the porous pave. And that's the, Joanna, those surrounds, it's like, it's recycled tires.
Yeah, but.
You've seen it, so it allows water to pass through and it keeps trash and stuff like that out. So it's really worked out well for us. So anyways, that's where we're currently at, along with watering, intensive watering schedule currently. So all of our trees are still being watered, minimum of twice a week. 2 people twice a week all day. And yeah, that's where we are. And looking to the future, we have some coordination to do a little bit with the 400 trees for the 400th anniversary, but those trees are ordered.
Have been ordered. We'll know in September what our options are, and then Chuck and I will meet with the nursery to pick in substitutions if we need to.
So the
Can I just
200,
add to that?
yes,
I was just wondering, AJ, when you get that list, I think last time you asked if we'd like to see it, and I thought more about it, and I think we would like to see it. And I'm wondering, I've been reading The Nature of Oaks. And so I'm wondering if oaks are, part of the list, or if they could be part of the list, or what do you think about oaks in urban settings?
yeah, so we did, how many species total do we have?
Five.
Yeah, we have 5 species, and one of the 5, so a fifth of our species are oaks.
Hooray, hooray,
yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they are
Essential.
essential, exactly. That's a good way to describe it. So that's coming down the pike, and, yeah.
What's the measured amount of water? I know we,
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we do 5 gallons. Well, it kind of varies, but right now it's 5 gallons per tree with 3 holes. So we have a deep root injecting gun that goes below the surface, and we've measured out that the amount of time they spend at the tree, they're giving that tree about 5 gallons of water
total,
total.
how frequently?
How frequently? Minimum of twice a week in these conditions. Obviously, this spring, we had a pretty good spring that we weren't watering a ton. And that also varies. It's easy to say, okay, 5 gallons per hole, but sometimes if it's been a long day, you'll find that you're at a tree and for a little too long, you're probably giving it 10 gallons. And you have to kind of watering them all day, your mind gets a little weird, so. Anywho, some trees might get more like 10, but a minimum of 5.
Are we still watering trees we planted last year?
Yes, so the list is combined, so it's, Max actually does a really good job this, he's like our, math guy. But he combines last year's and this year's plantings by root, so that you're not actually watering the list separate, they're all just complete. What's close to everything, so he's really good at that.
Is the contractor doing the Islington Street trees, watering them, or do you do that?
They're supposed to be watering them,
When reminded, they do.
yes. That's a constant battle, and that's worth a call to Severino, just to ensure that that's getting done.
Because so far, it looks like most of them are.
They do look good.
So that's gonna be sad to lose them at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
They're still under warranty, it's, a shame to have to use that warranty, but.
Yeah, and then lose it 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the new trees on Banfield Road, there are black gums, every black gum didn't make it, those are under warranty, so if you see those, they are getting replaced. They just won't do that till the fall.
Any other questions for Chuck? Yeah.
I just wanted to comment, I really like to see some messaging from DPW, the tree about We Think Blue video on on city tree work. The latest Think Blue video. I've had several residents reach out and they appreciate your proactive video. So thank you, Chuck and staff. Is that your voice, Chuck?
No, that credit goes 100% to Danny O, who is our, what's his job title? Stormwater specialist.
Specialist, water quality, GIS.
Yeah, he's very creative with making movies and funny scripts along with that. So I did collaborate with the language, but he really makes the movie. So I'll be sure to tell him. You like
It's
that.
very fun. If you haven't seen it, it's very clever.
Yeah, take a peek. It's fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
The tree planting for the city of 400, you've kind of covered that. Anything else on that? Any old business? Any new business? Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you.
Bye, guys. See you next month.
Bye.
What about that?